right. Well, I am flying solo, which is per the usual, actually. I'm okay with that. But who knows? Maybe somebody will jump on at some point. But yeah, we're still trucking along on chapter one, and I think this is the sixth installment. And last week we were looking at this idea of the middle way and what that is and what it isn't, at least, according to this particular translation of the teachings on the Eightfold Path by Bhikkhu here. And again, appreciate that he made this book available for free for people on the web. So you can find it in the chat here, a link to it. So thank you for that, Nathan. So we're on the only right way. The Buddha's instructions to his last disciple, Subhada, again, sorry if I got that wrong, the wanderer, focus on the point that the Noble Eightfold Path is the only way to unbinding. This is why the Buddha, from the very beginning, prefaced each factor of path with the word sama, or right. Any version of any of the factors that deviates from them or contradicts them is miccha, or wrong. And again, so sorry if I got that wrong. The Buddhist standard for judging right and wrong here is pragmatic. This point is illustrated in one of the suttas, where the right factors of the path are compared to the act of trying to get milk from a cow by pulling on its udder, whereas wrong versions of the factors are compared to the act of trying to get milk from the cow by twisting on its horn. Not only do you get no milk, but you also harass the cow. Oh my gosh, that's great. Okay. In other words, right and wrong are determined by what does and doesn't work in reaching the noble goal. But it's not the case that each factor of the path, when right on its own, is also noble. The interaction of the factors is what makes them fully right and noble as an ensemble. And so, yeah, again, we talked about this a lot several weeks ago, where in the introduction, I believe still, Bhikkhu is talking about this idea that the Eightfold Path, they're constantly interacting with each other, that they're not separate paving stones leading to a goal, that it's a process comprised of 8 interactive processes, and I think that's kind of what is once again kind of being reiterated here, is that it's whether or not it's yielding the results, right? And again, if you're following Buddhist ethics, then you know what those results are, and is what you're doing yielding those results, the results that are going to lead to liberation, right? To this idea of an unfabricated non-self, which might sound scary, conceptually. But again, I think if you've got a meditation practice and you just kind of keep at it, just kind of going in full well knowing that it's not going to be easy, and that everything isn't always easy. In fact, a lot of the things that are difficult to do are hard, right? They're hard in the beginning. And sometimes they remain hard, and that maybe running from that hardness, that difficulty, is not helpful, is not noble. Yeah, so I feel like I'm going off the rails, but at any rate. Okay, moving on. For instance, it's possible to practice concentration and arrive at a non-dual state of the oneness of consciousness or at a state in which everything glows with a white light, again in a later sutta. However, these states are fabricated and so do not count as the goal. So again, this goes back to what we talked about for the last several readings, right? Is that yes, and particularly last week, absolutely, when you start to climb up or I don't like that word climb up, but when you start to really get into meditation, if one does, and starts to develop a practice wherein you're maybe having access to some of those, that those later kind of higher jhanas, then yeah, you can produce quite a few pretty ecstatic states, but you are fabricating that through your feelings. And remember, feelings, among many other things, um, are among the five aggregates, and so it's not a judgment, right? It's just this idea that that's not necessarily noble. And again, see earlier sections. See, there's my bell, so I have to get back to reading no matter what. To mistake them for the goal would be an instance of wrong view, in which case the concentration, even though right, would not be part of the noble path. This would be true even if you started out with the correct verbal knowledge of right view, looking for the unfabricated, but then mistook the fabricated for the unfabricated when actually encountering it in practice. The problem in this case would lie in the fact that alertness, one of the sub-factors of right mindfulness, was not acute enough to detect the changes in these bright, non-dual states that would signal the fact of their being fabricated. Wow. So this is really, really dense here. And again, this is just my interpretation of what's being said. I'm not a scholar. I'm doing this book club because I hadn't revisited the Dharma in a long time. And, I wanted to gift this to myself. And if anybody else is into it, yeah, and interested. But how I'm taking this here is that if you don't remain alert, and again, we'll be looking much more deeply, I'm certain of it, because it's one of the rights, and it's the last of the rights on the Eightfold Path, right concentration. But if you don't have enough alertness, something that you can cultivate through concentration meditation, and then, by extension, other forms like Vipassana, then how I'm taking this is then you're not going to notice when you shift into perhaps a jhana where you're kind of shifting from being an observer, right? This kind of non-dualistic observer to kind of getting overcome by a feeling state. Now, again, this isn't a judgment. Okay. This is just where, again, this is maybe where, and again, I don't know much about Hinduism. Okay. But this might be a big departure from Hinduism. I really don't know. Okay. But again, in Buddhism, you're looking to not cling, to fabricated experiences. It's just a choice, right? It's a decision, it's a choice. So yeah, that's my take on that. Okay. This means that although, excuse me, this means that although all the factors of the path have to be directed by noble right view in order to be noble as well as right, right view itself needs to be trained in practice by developing the other factors of the path in order to become noble. To state this in terms of the distinction made in DN 33, which I have to assume that they're talking about a sutta that we're going to be looking at the end, right view has to grow from a form of discernment based on listening and thinking. So I'm going to do my best here. Suttamaya Pana and Sintamaya Pana. So I hope I did relatively okay with that. Into a form of discernment based on developing skillful qualities in the mind. Bhavanamaya Pana. Only then will it be right enough to bear noble fruit. We will return to this point in the next chapter, and in fact, it will be a reoccurring theme in the discussions of the path factors for the remainder of this book. Thank goodness. Woo! Okay, so some of this I feel like maybe I can speak to a little bit, and then the other, boy, I'm out of my depth and glad that we're going to be getting into it later. So I'm just going to kind of go back and just read. Okay, so it says, right view, it's in, okay, right view needs to be trained and practiced by developing the other factors of the path. It has to grow from a form of discernment based on listening and thinking. Okay, yeah. Okay, so right view, right? The noble right view, which, again, right view, the first of the rights on the Eightfold Path, right view is essentially the Four Noble Truths, right? So here, what I'm getting from this is they're saying, hey, so you're training your mind. Oops, I'm going to have to read again. So I have to keep this really short. You're training your mind in contemplating that. Okay, I promised that I would read when that bell went off. It just went off. So I'm going to stop talking. All right. Later schools of Buddhism have criticized the Pāli Canon for its insistence on the objective distinction between right and wrong forms of the path, accusing it of being dualistic, at the same time claiming that monoism, the doctrine that all is one, is a higher view. However, it's important to make a distinction between dualism as a principle and dualities as a fact. Dualism as a principle would say that the universe comes down to two main underlying principles, a position that the Buddha never takes in the Pāli Canon. In fact, he refused to take a position on the question of whether the cosmos is basically a oneness or a plurality. And it sounds like we're going to get to see what is said there in a later sutta, on the grounds that the question did not conduce to the end of suffering and stress, right? And again, we've already gotten to read quite a bit about how, the Buddha is very clear. Buddha is very clear about what his aim was, and really his entire aim is to help one to find out for themselves how to alleviate their own suffering, right? And again, this idea, that can get really sticky. What does that mean? Life is suffering, and again, we already talked about that in previous sections. All right. However, he did take a position on the distinction, a duality, between skillful and unskillful conduct, describing in detail what counts as skillful and unskillful, and stating in clear terms that they had to be treated differently. So again, that'll be a sutta coming up. Skillful conduct should be developed, unskillful conduct abandoned. So again, this is a repeat of last week's reading, right? So, his view is kind of more pragmatic. Again, this is one of the things that I personally really. Sorry about that. My audio probably just got a lot better than it was before. Whoops. But this is something that I really like myself about, this particular path, is that there's, it really comes down to more of a kind of a practical, is what you're doing going to help you reach your goal or not help you reach your goal, which is, to have a little bit of a taste of that unfabricated self, right? That self that isn't mired down by the stories that we have been conditioned to believe, right? And we have some reprieve from that. So that, I think that's kind of, I don't know. That's kind of what I'm taking from this here. All right, so I lost my place. Sorry. Again, this is a repeat from last week. This is because these two types of conduct lead to two different directions: away from suffering and stress, or toward suffering and stress. See earlier sections. The difference between suffering and not suffering is a basic duality built into the way things are. So again, this goes back to right view, the Four Noble Truths. Life is suffering, right? But again, that's not exactly what, the Buddha said, right? It was more like our response to life is what creates suffering, right? And so Buddha making that bold claim, right, that this is just a part of the human condition, that it can't be argued that if you're alive, if you're breathing in and out, you are experiencing this psychological dynamic called the mind and the mental processes, right, of fabrication, driven by the five aggregates. If the Buddha had not made this distinction, he would have neglected what he saw as one of his prime duties as a teacher, providing the safety that comes with having a clear sense of what should and shouldn't be done by a person who wants to avoid causing suffering and harm. And again, that'll be a later sutta, right? Remember again that it's called Buddhist ethics, right? And ethics are critical in Buddhism as a religion and as a philosophy. They are of paramount important, much like in Stoicism, from what the limited knowledge, very limited knowledge that I have of Stoicism. Any potential student refusing to admit this distinction, the Buddha would have regarded as unfit to teach. Wow. So again, really clear boundaries, if you will, right? And again, remember what this section is saying. This section is saying, hey, this is the only way, right? Such a bold, very confident here, very confident. Okay. He was so sure of this distinction and of the objective rightness of the factors of the path to the end of suffering that he stated in one of the later suttas that one of the signs that a person has reached the first stage of awakening is the realization that outside of the Buddha's teachings, there is no accurate description of the way to unbinding. Wow. That is, that's pretty radical to my view. I can't, I don't have a lot of experience with other paths. I came up secular, as I mentioned before, did not come up in a religious home. My parents were secular. Um, so, it's not like I can actually look at this and compare it to another path, right? Another perhaps religious faith or a philosophical kind of adoption that one might assume, right? Because again, perhaps they see the building on fire that is their own mind, right? And maybe they've come to learn through personal experiences, I have anyway, that they need a map, right? That it's much easier to do life when you have a map. Um, but I can say that this is certainly true for me. That yeah, this has had pretty radical implications for me, practicing this and kind of coming to see it through, a long-term practice. Yeah, I still am very bound, right? I still get bound, I still get triggered, I still experience Shempa, that, but the degree to which I've experienced unbinding in my life is pretty radical. When I think about what was my life like 20, see how old am I don't know, 26 years ago, I guess, maybe, when I found this particular approach to doing life and my life today, I just can't even believe sometimes. It's just, I can't even believe it. I marvel really at, yeah, I think some of you know I study psychology, and today I'm doing a blog post. I'm writing about something called social cognition theory by a guy, Albert Bandura, who I think like 1978, something like that. But just well, I don't want to go off the rails. Thank goodness I set a timer, right? But I'll just say that the degree to which I've experienced unbinding in my own life through the action process of following Buddhist ethics to the best of my ability, very imperfectly. I have my own karma, you know, um, has been a radical unbinding, and I'm grateful every day. For anyone who has yet to reach that point, this is impossible to know. You have to reach the top of the mountain to see clearly which paths lead there and which paths don't. And yeah, the Buddha talked about this a lot. Um, that this really is very experiential. That the Buddhism as a philosophy. Because to my mind, and again, I know many would disagree with this and perhaps find this very offensive, and I mean no disrespect, but to my view, when I look at interpretations of different things that I've learned through different teachers throughout my life about what Buddha was reported to have said, he seems to have spent an inordinate amount of time focusing on how we can and only can come to it for ourselves, and no one else can help us get there. And so I have to read. That was my bell. All right. It's for this reason that the Buddha did not force anyone to believe in his teachings without testing them, because the path is something that can be followed only voluntarily. After all, to test the path is a demanding project. Amen to that. In that it requires a total retraining of one's own thoughts and actions. The only compulsion in choosing whether to take on the path comes from the brute fact of suffering. When you've decided you've suffered enough and you've prepared to look for the sources of suffering inside, then you're ready to give the path a serious try to see if the Buddha's middle way really does lead to the end of suffering and to the unfabricated bliss of unbinding. Oh, yeah. Boy, that sure is. Man, can I get an amen to that? That has certainly absolutely been my experience. Yep, I'll just say yes. Yes to all of that. Wow. Readings. Okay. The first teaching. These two are extremes that are not to be indulged in by one who has gone forth. Which two? That which is devoted to sensual pleasure in connection with sensuality, base, vulgar, common, ignoble, unprofitable, and that which is devoted to self affliction, painful, ignoble, unprofitable. Avoiding both of these extremes, the middle way, realized by the Tathagata, producing vision, producing knowledge, leads to stilling, to direct knowledge, to self awakening, to unbinding. And which is the middle way realized by the Tathagata, that producing vision, producing knowledge, leads to stilling, to direct knowledge, to self awakening, to unbinding? Precisely this Noble Eightfold Path: right view, right resolve, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. This is the middle way, realized by the Tathagata, that, again, I'm so sorry if I killed that producing vision, producing knowledge, leads to stilling, to direct knowledge, to self awakening, to unbinding. Wow. I have no comment. I'm just going to let that wash over me. And it's very good to go a little bit more direct there. Yeah. last teaching. Then Sabata, the wanderer, went to the Blessed One and, on arrival, exchanged courteous greetings with him. After an exchange of friendly greetings and courtesies, he sat to one side. As he was sitting there, he said to the Blessed One, Master Gautama, these contemplatives and Brahmins, each with his group, each with his community, each the teacher of his group, an honored leader, well regarded by people at large, Purana Kasapa, Makali Gosalya, Ajita Kesakambalan, Pakuda Kasayana Sanaya Bela Taputa, and the Ningta Nataputa. Apologies. Okay, that was like my first effort on that. Do they all have direct knowledge as they themselves claim? Or do they all not have direct knowledge? Or do some of them have direct knowledge and some of them not? Enough, Sabata. Put this question aside. Do they all have direct knowledge as they themselves claim? Or do they all not have direct knowledge? Or do some of them have direct knowledge and some of them not? I will teach you the Dhamma, Sabata. Listen and pay close attention. I will speak. As you say, Lord, Sabata responded to the Blessed One. The Blessed One said, in any Dhamma and Vinaya, where the Noble Eightfold Path is not ascertained, no contemplative of the first, second, third, fourth order, stream winner, once returner, non-returner, or arahant, and again, this is where I'm way out of my depth, is ascertained. But in any Dhamma and Vinaya, where the Noble Eightfold Path is ascertained, contemplatives of the first, second, third, fourth order are ascertained. The Noble Eightfold Path is ascertained in this Dhamma and Vinaya. And right here, there are contemplatives of the first, second, third, fourth order. Other teachings are empty of knowledgeable contemplatives. And if the monks dwell rightly, this world will not be empty of arahants. So I'm just going to be really honest, and this is just really where I wish that, oh gosh, I had a teacher here with me. And I'm looking forward to visiting these again later at the end. But I think what I'm hearing, what I think what I'm getting from this here is, and I'm just kind of going back and skimming this again. So it sounds like he's saying, it sounds like he's not, like the way teachers can get lovingly frustrated, not that kind of, just put away with all the thought, put away with all the thinking, student, is what I'm hearing him say, and just listen to what I'm going to tell you right now. So that's how I took that first part, is okay, this student, is trying to understand there's all these teachers out there, they all are saying that they know which way to go and which is the way, and are they all right? Are they wrong? Or some right or some wrong? What's right? What's wrong? That's kind of how I took that, is questions about these other teachers. And I just hear his teacher saying, okay, let's just put that away now and listen to what I have to say. This is important. Pay attention. Okay, now I need to read this part again. Yeah, and this is where I'm just sorely, I would need help, because I don't understand, I don't know enough about what the first, second, third, and fourth order stream means. It's been, I don't even remember being exposed to that, so I'm just not going to comment, and I'm just going to move it along and wish that I had someone here to straighten me out on that. Okay, on the word path. Okay, so again, this looks like more from suttas. Suppose that there were a pit of glowing embers, deeper than a man's height, full of glowing embers that were neither flaming nor smoking. A man scorched with heat, overcome by heat, exhausted, trembling, and thirsty, would come along a path going one way only. Ekayana Maga, directed to that pit of glowing embers. A man with good eyes, on seeing him, would say, the way this individual has practiced, the way he conducts himself, and the path he has entered are such that he will come to that pit of glowing embers. Then at a later time he would see him, having fallen into the pit of glowing embers, experiencing feelings that are exclusively painful, piercing, and racking. In the same way, Sariputta, there is the case where, having thus encompassed awareness with awareness, I know of a certain individual. The way this individual has practiced, the way he conducts himself, and the path he has entered are such that he will, at the breakup of the body after death, reappear in a plane of deprivation, a bad destination, a lower realm, hell. Then at a later time I see him, at the breakup of the body after death, reappearing in a plane of deprivation, a bad destination, a lower realm, hell, experiencing feelings that are exclusively painful, piercing, and racking. Ellipses, right? As if, I have to assume as if to say ad infinitum, you know? Suppose that there were a cesspool deeper than a man's height, full of excrement. A man scorched with heat, overcome by heat, exhausted, trembling, and thirsty, would come along a path going one way only, directed to that cesspool. A man with good eyes, on seeing him, would say, the way this individual has practiced, the way he conducts himself, and the path he has entered are such that he will come to that cesspool. Then, at a later time, he would see him, having fallen into the cesspool, experiencing feelings that are painful, piercing, and racking. In the same way, I know of a certain individual. The way this individual has practiced, the way he conducts himself, and the path he has entered are such that he will, at the breakup of the body after death, reappear in the realm of the animal womb, experiencing feelings that are painful, piercing, and racking. Suppose that there were a tree growing on uneven ground with scanty foliage providing spotty shade. A man, scorched with heat, overcome by heat, exhausted, trembling, and thirsty, would come along a path going one way only, directed to that tree. A man with good eyes, on seeing him, would say, the way this individual has practiced, the way he conducts himself, and the path he has entered are such that he will come to that tree. Then, at a later time, he would see him sitting or lying down in the shade of that tree, experiencing feelings that are for the most part painful. In the same way, I know of a certain individual. The way this individual has practiced, the way he conducts himself, and the path he has entered are such that he will, at the breakup of the body after death, reappear in the realm of the hungry ghosts, experiencing feelings that are, for the most part, painful. Suppose that there were a tree growing on even ground, with lush foliage providing dense shade. A man scorched with heat, overcome by the heat, exhausted, trembling, and thirsty, would come along a path going one way, only directed to that tree. A man with good eyes, on seeing him, would say, the way this individual has practiced, the way he conducts himself, and the path he has entered are such that he will come to that tree. Then, at a later time, he would see him sitting or lying down in the shade of that tree, experiencing feelings that are for the most part pleasant. In the same way, I know of a certain individual. The way this individual has practiced, the way he conducts himself, and the path he has entered are such that he will, at the breakup of the body after death, reappear among human beings, experiencing feelings that are for the most part pleasant. Suppose that there were a palace compound, and in it was a mansion with a gabled roof, plastered inside and out, draft free with the close-fitting door and windows shut against the wind, And in it was a throne-like bed spread with long fleeced coverlet, a white wool coverlet, an embroidered coverlet, a rug of Kadali deer hide with a canopy above, and red cushions on either side. A man, scorched with heat, overcome by heat, exhausted, trembling, and thirsty, would come along a path going one way, only directed to that palace compound. A man with good eyes on seeing him would say, the way this individual has practiced, the way he conducts himself, and the path he has entered are such that he will come to that palace compound. Then, at a later time, he would see him sitting or lying down on the throne like bed in that mansion with a gabled roof in that palace compound, experiencing feelings that are exclusively pleasant. In the same way, I know of a certain individual. The way this individual has practiced, the way he conducts himself, and the path he has entered are such that he will, at the breakup of the body, after death, reappear in a good destination, a heavenly world, experiencing feelings that are exclusively pleasant. Suppose that there were a lotus pond with pristine water, pleasing water, cool water, pellucid water, with restful banks, refreshing, and not far from it was a dense forest grove. A man, scorched with heat, overcome by heat, exhausted, trembling, and thirsty, would come along a path going one way only, directed to that lotus pond. A man with good eyes on seeing him would say, the way this individual has practiced, the way he conducts himself, and the path he has entered are such that he will come to that lotus pond. Then, at a later time, he would see him having plunged into the lotus pond, having bathed and drunk and relieved all his disturbance, exhaustion, and fever, and having come back out, sitting or lying down in the forest grove, experiencing feelings that are exclusively pleasant. In the same way, Sariputta, there is the case where, having thus encompassed awareness with awareness, I know of a certain individual. The way this individual has practiced, the way he conducts himself, and the path he has entered are such that he will, through the ending of the effluence, enter and remain in the effluent free awareness release and discernment release, having directly known and realized it for himself right in the here and now. Then, at a later time, I see him through the ending of the effluence, having entered and remaining in the effluent free awareness release and discernment release, having directly known and realized it for himself right in the here and now, experiencing feelings that are exclusively pleasant. Wow. So I am going to just kind of sit with that for a moment. To my view, this is getting at, and again, I have no idea if I'm even close to being right on this. Again, I just have to kind of measure it up against what I know, the limited knowledge that I received in terms of the teachings of Buddhism, which were also quite a long time ago, as I mentioned. This is really getting into the most kind of powerful, I guess, ramifications of what karma really is. That so in the first analogy, the man is going to move towards the glowing embers because it's a relief from their current state. They're on fire, they're overcome, right, by heat. They're exhausted, they're trembling, and they're thirsty. So they're desperate, right? They're in a I guess from a psychological perspective, to my view, when you're desperate, you'll follow any path that leads to freedom from your current situation, your current producer of desperation, if that makes any sense. And so, yeah, you're going to go towards the embers.
And he's saying, because, if this person's got eyes, they see that this is better. This is going to provide me with some relief. And it's suggesting that the life that they've lived up to this point has produced their current state, and why their only reprieve can be embers, which will only produce more suffering. Phew. Sure would love to have like a fact checker, well, a fact checker, right? But like a scholar checker on this one. But this is how I'm taking this, right? I'm going back to like the first section of the sutta here. So that's the first man. Um, And so, of course, he's walking on that path, and the path, what they think of right? Again, this idea that, well, it's karma both after death, right? But also karma in the here and now, that the action steps that we take will produce the, the path, right? Will produce what's at the end of the path. So he's, at a later time, he sees him and he goes, yeah, okay, that makes sense that, if you're gonna follow that path, you're probably going to wind up in those embers. That's, kind of stands to reason. And, he's feeling more pain, right? And so the teacher says, I know people like this, right? In other words, I've met, I think in the larger sense, he's saying, I've met all of these people. I've met all of these teachers of which you speak, Sariputta, right? All of these teachers, I've met them all, right? So I've met this individual. I know this person. And he says, and I suspect that I know that, even after he dies, he's going to again, this idea of karma, right? He's going to be reborn into a lower hell realm. Again, in Buddhism, this is the kind of the religious, groundings of Buddhism that for me were not a simple fit, again, because I grew up secular, but there's a certain amount of logic here, that, okay, that would, if the Buddhists and the Hindus are right, and we keep coming back, we keep recycling, then that does kind of make sense to me, that that would arise. So that was my timer, but I'm not going to read anymore right now because I actually think I just need to kind of tease this out because wow, we're getting into the suttas here and this is it's getting tougher. Okay, so that was the first analogy. Okay. And again, the second one is just another example of, hey, when you are on fire, um, you're looking for the thing that will just say provide immediate relief. And if there's nothing else on offer, then you're going to take the path that's going to bring you to the immediate relief, even if that's a cesspool. And again, I'm assuming how I'm taking this is the reason why the cesspool's at the end of that path is because of the path that individual walked. Okay, so again, I hope I'm close to getting that right. And then what was the third one? Suppose that there was a tree growing on uneven ground. Again, same idea, right? That, okay, there's obstacles, right? Uh, you know, it's going to be tough to get there. It's not going to be a perfect walk, it's going to, if you're going to practice this way, still kind of uneven ground, still a path, right? That represents uneven ground. Again, I have no idea if I'm getting this right. A path that provides spotty shade. You know what I mean? Like if that's the path, and then you come along and you see this tree at the end of it, right? Yeah, you're gonna take that path. It's the one that's available and improved to your current situation. Again, any man with eyes, right? Anyone could see that. And so again, I think that that's how I'm taking this. That he's just kind of ramping it up, kind of once again reiterating that your path is leading to what's at the end of the path. And I've known every single one of these individuals who've walked paths like that, who've led to paths like that, who I suspect when they die will be born into a state that will reflect that previous path. And again, I'm not sure how well I did there, but there you go. Okay. So at the end of this story, I'm taking it as, we're all that man with our house on fire. We're all exhausted, right? All of our houses are on fire. Where it's breaking down for me, where my ignorance is quite apparent to me is he saying in this sutta that, and it would make sense if in the context of what I know about Buddhism, if he's saying here that, that, and humans have no control over that, right? Like that maybe we're all houses on fire, and we don't, I don't know. I'm a little bit confused about that part. Okay. Maybe all of it. I don't know. You tell me if you're listening to this and you're a scholar on Buddhism. I'd love your feedback. So, yeah, so we're kind of coming up on the end of the hour. So I think because that was the end of that sutta, I am just going to stop right there. I hope I got that like somewhat right. Thank you for listening. If anyone is listening, and I flew solo today, so yeah, if anybody's out there, hello, hello, hello. Be well. I'm sending you wellness. May you be peaceful. May you be happy. May you be free from suffering. Take care.